So, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, starting now. So, associated events are identified by using a combination of objective criteria. So, the first one is deterioration of respiratory status after a period of stability, or improvement on the ventilator associated condition. That's called ventilator associated condition. So, this is the first part of the ventilator associated event, the deterioration of respiratory status after a period of stability or improvement on the ventilator. The second part will be evidence of infection or inflammation, what we call it infectious ventilator-associated condition or inflammatory ventilator-associated condition. The third part will be a laboratory evidence of respiratory infection, what we call it possible ventilator-associated pneumonia. So, parameters. First one is minimum FA2. The other one is minimum new antibiotic, WBC temperature. WBC, that's mean increase more than 12 or less than 2000. Temperature, we will talk about culture taking date with we will talk also about the episodes and the VAEs. The other parameters like length of stay, date of admission, date of discharge, outcomes is all mentioned in the VAE form. Will be discussed in details with Mr. Abdullah. We will talk about it later. So in minimum FI2 and minimum PEEP, the meaning of this is during 24 hours from 12 midnight to 12 midnight. So what's the minimum FI2 and minimum PEEP was for the patient? And the condition is that minimum PEEP or minimum FI2 should last at least 1 hour. So if, for example, if a patient was put in FI2 of 30 and he didn't tolerate within 30 minutes and returned back to 40 or 50, so 30 should be not documented as the minimum FI2. The minimum FI2 should last at least for 1 hour. That will be also with the minimum PEEP. The new antibiotics for the patient, we are talking about adding a new antibiotic on the day of the VAC, the ventilator-associated condition, 2 days before, 2 days after. We'll talk later about it in details. So what's the VAE period? The VAE period, window period, this is the period of days around the event date. That's even dates, the VAC date, specifically the day of the onset of worsening of oxygenation, within which other VAEs criteria must be met. It's usually a 5-day period and include the 2 days period before, the day of, and the 2 days after the VAE event date. Specifically the first day of the worsening oxygenation, the day of VAE onset. So that in say VAE period, usually it's 5 days, but sometimes it can be 3 days or 4 days. The exception is when the 2 days before the VAC condition or the day of deterioration is the first day and second day of ventilation, should be not counted. So if you just think about it, you have the day of VAC, 2 days before and 2 days after. That's 5 days. All these 5 days, we will see if any antibiotics was added. We will see the WBC and temperature, and we will see if the culture was sent on that period of time. The exception is if within the 5 days you have the first day of ventilation and second day of ventilation should be not count on this period. That's the exception only. The other parameter we are looking for is episodes of clinical ventilation defined as a period of days during which the patient was mechanically ventilated from some portion of each consecutive day. So what we are saying here is that
Again, sir. There is rounds for.
For any question, you can just at the end you can write it down in the chat, and we will talk about in details. So again, episodes. Episodes is defined as a period of days during which the patient was mechanically ventilated for some portion of each consecutive day. What this is mean? Each patient has one episode. Each ventilated patient has one episode. So if the patient intubated and extubated, that's one episode. So as a rule, number of ventilated patients equal to number of episodes. That's rule one. The second rule, episodes can be more than the number of ventilated patients. So one patient can have 2 episodes, 3 episodes, and never the episode will be less than the ventilated patient. So a break in mechanical ventilation of at least 1 full calendar day, and calendar day, the meaning of calendar day is 12 midnight to 12 midnight, followed by a reintubation and or reinitiation of mechanical ventilation during the same hospitalization defines as a new episode of mechanical ventilation. I will have an example here so it will be clear. You can see in the first one, in the first example, we have mechanical day number, mechanical ventilation day number. So we have the first day, second day, third day, fourth day, fifth day, and the sixth day. So in the sixth day, patient was extubated at noon. Okay. Now we have on the 7th day, the patient reintubated. So in this example, there is no full calendar day a patient was out of ventilator. That means 12 to 12 midnight. So in this example, what you will do is you should continue calculating the mechanical ventilation day. So it will be 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, and you will go on. In the second example, you can see that the mechanical ventilation number there is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. In these days, patient was on ventilator. 6. In the 6th, patient extubated at noon. But any part of the day, even 1 hour, patient was on mechanical ventilation, it's counted as mechanical ventilated day. So on the 6th was extubated. On the 7th, 12 to 12, patient was not on ventilator. And then on the 8th, hospital day, the patient was reintubated. So in this example, what you will do is you will say that the patient has 1 episode here of mechanical ventilation, and you have the second episode here in on mechanical ventilation. So at the end result, when you calculate the data, the episodes will be 2, not 1. In the first example, the episode will be 1 only. The difference will it's very important, because when you calculate if any deterioration in oxygenation on that patient, you have to calculate the days on consequence. For more clarification, any question you can write in the chat box. Any questions we will answer at the end of the presentation. So there is some exceptions. The patient should be out of this project. Patient was DNR, did not resuscitate, or no code, whatever the concept there in your hospital. Patient on ECMO, and patient on high frequency oscillator ventilator. So those patients are when they will be connected, when they are DNR at that day, you should not collect any data for him from that day and after. Patient on ECMO, the same thing. Patient on high frequency oscillator ventilator, also the data will be stopped, data collection. I mean. When they are out of this and still in mechanical ventilation, you will continue collecting the data. And also there is a patient on APRV mode. On that mode, usually you collect only the FI2. You will not collect the PEEP. We'll talk about it. So at the end, this is the form usually look like. Briefly, I will just talk about it here. So you have the structured ID. It's very important to put an ID. So when you send us the form, and we have some question about the way of calculating the VAEs, and we send it back to you just to be sure, you should have an ID so you can go back to the patient. Hospital name, unit name, date of admission is very important, came from where, and the ICU discharge date. So in this example, patient still admitted. And those patients who are still admitted, usually we collect data for them for 90 days. I mean, still admitted and on ventilator. So 90 days, 90. After the 90 days, they will drop from the project and will collect only the 90 days of that patient. And you can see that this part has three columns part, separated with a bold line here. So in the first part, you have the date, and then the ventilated yes or no, and minimum PEEP, minimum FI2, and the patient has VAC or not, yes or no. Then the second one, if the patient has VAC, only you will fill this part only if you have a ventilator-associated condition coming from this column. So if you have VAC, like this example, so this patient has VAC, so you'll collect the data of new antibiotics, temperature more than 38 or less than 36, or the patient has WBC count more than 12,000 or less or equal than 4,000. And then if you have the condition, we'll talk about it later on. If you have a new antibiotic plus one of these, then you have IVAC. And if you have IVAC only, third part, you will look if a patient has collected culture within the VA period we'll talk about. VA period is the day of VAC, 2 days before and 2 days after, 5 days. So any new antibiotic within these 5 days that was continued for 4 days, any temperature or WBC within the VA period, and any culture was collected within the VA period. In this example, you have a Pseudomonas aeruginosa, so you have yes. So this patient has a PVAC. At the end here, you can see the patient status. If the patient was discharged, transferred to other hospital or other ICU, or died inside the ICU. Here, clarification about VAC. You can see the VAC is small part in the IVAC and then the BVAC. And this small box here is also very important with us, total ventilator days. So you will count all the ventilator days. You put the number here. Also, there is missing here something, length of stay, and it should be calculated from the admission date and discharge date. So usually it's discharge date minus the admission date plus 1. You have total VAC, total IVAC, and total VVAC. In this example, the patient has VAC, has IVAC, and has VVAC. You don't document the VAC or IVAC. You usually always document the last result, like VVAC. Here, this example, they document only VVAC, 1. We'll talk about it. Total number of ventilator episodes. In this example, you can see that the patient was ventilated all the time. So this is 1 episode for this patient. Mr. Abdullah will talk about it later in more details. So, starting after now, what we did in the previous example, we collect the data. The data need to be collected is the minimum PEEP, minimum FI2, ventilator day, and the date. That's the most important thing in this form. And we define the minimum PEEP and minimum FI2, which is the minimum FI2 and minimum PEEP that lasts at least 1 hour on that patient. So after collection these data, what you will do is go for identification of ventilator-associated condition, ventilator infection related ventilator-associated condition, and VVAC, VAC, IVAC, and VVAC. So how to do it? Step 1, the daily minimum PEEP. If the daily minimum PEEP increase more than 20 or equal than 20 for more than 2 days, or the daily minimum PEEP increase more or equal than 3, CM order for more or equal than 2 days. So the first condition to say this patient has a VAC or not: the daily minimum PEEP, daily minimum FI2, daily minimum FI2, and daily minimum PEEP. So daily minimum FI2 increased by 20, or the daily minimum PEEP increase or equal than 3. And the increase should be more than 2 days or equal. This is very important. And those increases should happen after 2 days of stable or decreasing daily minimum values. We will have examples on just to clarify it later on. So if you have this in step 1, you will go for step 2. So step 1 is to define if the patient has a ventilator-associated condition, which is VAC. So if the patient has VAC, you will go for step 2, which is if the temperature more than 38, less than 36, or white blood cell count more than 12 or equal, more or equal 12,000, or less or equal 4,000, and a new antimicrobial agent started and continued for more than 4 days or equal than 4 days. So in step 2, first, you look for the new antibiotics. The patient within the VA period, the 5 days we talk about. So if there is any new antibiotics within the VA period, plus temperature or WBC, that means that the patient has IVAC. The new antibiotics in the VA period mean that if the team started new antibiotics for that patient, and if even started in day, let's say in the day of VAC, started on tazocine, for example, and on the after that day they see the tazocine and they start on meropenem. So that's considered as continuation of that antibiotic. So the first day was tazocine, the second day was meropenem. That's day 1 and day 2 of new antimicrobial agent. And if that antibiotics was continued for more than 4 days, it's considered as a condition to start looking for temperature and WBC. The third step is looking for cultures. So in CBC criteria, we have 3 criteria. Positive culture of one of the following specimens meeting quantitative or semi-quantitative. Samples taken from endotracheal aspirate, lung tissue, bronchial alveolar lavage, protected specimen brush. Or the criteria 2, prolonged respiratory secretion plus organisms identified from one of the following specimens: sputum, lung tissue, endotracheal aspirate, protected specimen brush, or bronchial alveolar lavage. The third criteria is organism identified from pleural fluid, diagnostic test for Legionella species, lung histopathology, diagnostic test for selected viral pathogen. Now, because the quantitative and semi-quantitative criteria, which is epithelial cell less than 10 or neutrophils more than 25, usually we don't have it in the results of the cultures, most of the hospitals. So after discussing with Dr. Arabi, we agreed that any positive cultures was taken within the VA period came with the organism considered as a positive culture. Plus the third criteria, which if you have a histopathology or Legionella species came positive, or viral pathogens was taken. So in general, we have 3 steps to calculate the VAEs. Step 1, to calculate the VAC, ventilator-associated condition. Step 2, calculate the IVAC. Step 3, the cultures, which if it's positive, you will have a VVAC. So the most important thing, it's the daily minimum FI2 and the daily minimum P. And this will give you a ventilator-associated condition, or what you call it VAC. The second step, you look for, if you have a VAC, you will look for the temperature, you will look for the what WBC count, plus the new antibiotics. And if you have it, you will go for the BVAB, which is the culture result if it's positive. Now, running through it, so step 1, starting from the 3rd day of mechanical ventilation, that means you have a patient was on ventilator day 1, day 2, and then you have the third day. So the worsening of the condition should be calculated from the third day. And to calculate that, you should have at least 4 days. At least 4 days, so you can do the calculation of that. So in the increase of FI2 more than 20, or PEEP more than 3 or equal 3, for at least 2 days. So you have a worsening patient condition. So you have to increase the FI2 or increase the PEEP. The increase of FI2 more than 20 or PEEP more than 3, each one of them. So if you really have it, so you go to yes, you should see the previous 2 days. So if there is stability or improvement of FI2 or PEEP for the previous 2 days, meaning that the patient was on 5 of PEEP, for last 2 days was 5 and 5. So that's stability. If the patient was on 8 and then decreased to 5, that's mean improvement. This is also can be done for the FI2. If the patient was on 30%, let's say 40% of FI2, the previous 2 days was 40 and 40, that's called stability. If the patient was on 60 and decreased to 50 or 40, that's mean improvement. And worsening condition the number should be more than 20 or more than 3 in PEEP. So if you really have a stability or improvement in FI2 and PEEP, and then you have a worsening of condition that continue for 2 days, that means you have 1 VAC, which is ventilation associated condition. So if you have this VAC, you will go for B. B is you look for the IVAC. And if you have 1 VAC, what you will do is the second VAC should not be calculated until 14 days passed. Should be 14 days completed, so you can go all over again if you have a VAC. And anytime you don't have this condition, you will go back and collect the data again, the minimum PEEP and minimum FI2. So this is step 1. So in this step, you will have a VAC or no VAC. In APRV mode, you only document FI2, so you don't look for the PEEP. That's the only exception. So in the second step, which you are looking now for IVAC. So VAC already documented. You will look for the temperature more than 38 or less than 36, or WBC more than 12,000 or equal, or less than or equal than 4,000. In the VAE period, which is the 5 days we mentioned about. We mentioned before. So if you really you have a WBC and temperature, yes, you will go for the new antibiotic. Do you hear us now? Continue. I think you should go back to your slide. Yeah. So back to the IVAC. We said already we have a VAC. So we will go for the temperature and WBC. If yes, if you have no, you will only document VAC. So when you have a VAC, you wait for the VAE period, 5 days. It's passed. Without these conditions, you will document only VAC. If yes, you have the temperature or WBC, you will go for the antibiotics. If you have an antibiotic new in the VAE period, you will have to be sure that these antibiotics were continued for 4 days. If yes, you will document IVAC and you remove the VAC. So at the end result, at the small box in the form, you make in the VAC 0. You put IVAC 1. So when you have an IVAC, what you are going to do, you will go and search for if the patient has a VAE. So what you will do is to see if the culture, any tracheal aspirate culture, bronchial lavage, brush, anything, culture, viral screening was taken in the VA period, which is the 5 days we took from the back time. Okay, from the back time. So if you don't have it, no culture was collected at that time, so you'll document only IVAC. And you will wait for 14 days, as we said, so you can collect another data. So actually, yes, the team ordered a culture from the respiratory, from the endotracheal, so you will wait for the results. If yes, so we said, if you remember in the CDC, they said criteria 1, criteria 2, and criteria 3, but this can be have enough, any culture came with positive organism, you put it as yes, and you will document only BVAP, and you will not document any IVAC or VAC. And from the day of VAC, you will wait for 14 days, so you can calculate another VAE. And from these 14 days, I will advise you to continue collecting data for minimum PEEP and minimum FI2. Because at the time of validation, when the papers comes to us to validate, sometimes the calculation of VAC was not correct, so we are losing the data after that. So I will advise you to continue collect of minimum PEEP and minimum FI2. So we spoke about the 3 steps, how to calculate the VAE, VAC, IVAC, and VVAC. So an example for this, you can see the daily minimum PEEP here, 0. So from 0 to 5, it's considered as 5. So any number from 5 and below is considered as 5 for the PEEP. So you can see in this example here, 5, 5, 5, 5, 8, 8. So you have first day of ventilation, second day of ventilation, third day of ventilation, 4, 5, and 6. And this is the minimum PEEP, and this is the minimum FI2. So in here, minimum PEEP, you can see there is an increase from 5. This is 8, so it's 3 apart. The difference is 3, so the increase by 3. And it continues for 2 days, 1 day and 2 days, 2 days of deterioration. And in the 5th and 6th day, the number of PEEP is more than the previous 2 days by 3. So this 5 difference from this 8 from 5 is 3 difference, and from this 5 also 3. And the second day of deterioration also the difference is 3 in the previous 2 days. This is very important. So it's not only the day of the deterioration the difference should be more than 3 or 3, also the second day. So if you have here 7, it's not considered. So here we have a ventilator associated condition or VAC based on the daily minimum PEEP. And in this example, the second one, also we have 5, 5, 5, as I told you, E is equals 5. You have the 5th and 6th day also here. This is deterioration, and the difference is 3 or more. Here the example for the FI2. So we have here FI2 40 and 40. That's stability, and then you have increase 70 in the 5th day. So you have to wait for the 6th day to collect the minimum PEEP. So the difference is more than 20. And again, there is stability here. And here, if you can see that the patient has deterioration on FI2 to 70. Now the difference is more than 20, and the deterioration continued in the second day of that. But if you can see here, the condition of deterioration, the deterioration on FI2 or PEEP, based on the previous 2 days, there is improvement or stability. Here you can see in the 3rd day it was 35, and the 4th day was 40. This is neither stability, neither improvement. This is worsening. So there is no event, because the condition of stability or improvement is not there. So we talk about the daily minimum PEEP and daily minimum FI2. So going to cultures. So cultures by CDC, they said the purulent respiratory secretions defined as secretion from the lungs, bronchi or trachea that contain more than 25 neutrophils and less than 2 cones of fluid, low power phase. Now the problem is most of the cultures we have a result, we don't have this, the semi-quantitative. But because it's mentioned already in the CDC, I just put the definition here, which is the criteria number 1 in cultures. We have some results which should be excluded, considered as negative. Excluded the organism and culture or non-culture based microbiological testing. These are the results that cannot be used to meet the BVAP definition are as follows. In a culture can normal respiratory flora, normal oral flora, mixed respiratory flora, mixed oral flora, or altered oral flora. Also excluding organisms, other similar results indicating isolation of commensal flora of the oral cavity or upper respiratory tract. Candida species or yeast not otherwise specified from the tracheal aspirate should not be considered as positive. Coagulase negative Staphylococcus species, Enterococcus species when identified. Okay, we will continue. Sorry for this technical problem. Exclude organism. We said that can the internet connection are unstable. Is the voice good now? Hello? Okay. To continue, exclude organism. Candida species or yeast not otherwise specified. Coagulase negative Staphylococcus species and Enterococcus species when identified from sputum, endotracheal aspirate, bronchoalveolar lavage, or protected specimen brushing specimen. Those organisms can be reported as BVAP pathogens if identified from lung tissue or pleural fluid specimen only. So now we spoke about the variable data that need to be collected, and then we spoke about how to calculate the VAE, VAC, IVAC, and BVAP. The chart will help you, and how to put it in the form, with some exceptions for the patient who should be excluded and exceptions on the cultures. Of course, all this information was taken from CDC, and if it can help you, you can use a CDC calculator just to be sure. If you have an event, I mean, if you have an event and you calculate as an event, to be 100%, it's really a VAC. You can go and put the data on the CDC calculator, and it will really give you the real answer if it is really VAC or not. So any question, please, you can ask or put it in the chat box. So thank you, everyone. If you go to more, you can raise hand and lower hand. So if you raise the hand, we will give you the mic and you can share your question with the others.
Stefan, everyone is on. Any questions?
We muted everyone. Please, if you want to ask about anything, unmute yourself so we can all hear you. So we can see also there's in the chat.
So we can move to our next presentation, which is just sharing with you the data collection sheet that we shared with the unit. So if you look into the website, you will have four parts. The first one, which is related to the NASA bundle. The second one is related to the early mobility and VAE rates and objective outcome measures. So we depend mainly on the VAE form to get the VAE rate and the objective outcome measures. So this is the data collection sheet that shown with an example earlier with Dr. Saleh. So in this area here, we document the minimal beep and minimal Y2. The first part, which is if it's fat, it will be filled to answer for the IBAC. Then once this part is filled, and if it's yes, you can go to the next part, which is the possible ventilator associated condition. All of the data collected here, it will be summarized in this box, which is showing the total ventilator days by counting all of the yes, and for the length of stay, we count the ICU admission date and the ICU discharge date, the days between. So this form should be filled for all patients, even if they spend 1 day or 2 days, because at the end, the number of patients counts in terms of how many events per patient. The total number of VAC, IVAC, and BVAP will be counted based on this form. And as explained, if the patient has VAC, we should just no need to collect the data for the next 14 days, but still we need to have the ventilated or not ventilated, because this will be added as the total 10 days. But we will not look for VAC after the documented VAC. And if we have VAC that tend to be IVAC, we will document only IVAC. We don't count it. So we found this in the data validation. Sometimes we see it as 1-1-1, which is 1 VAC, 1 IVAC, and 1 BVAP. I think it's by mistake. It should be BVAP only, because it overrides the previous conditions. The total number of ventilator episodes. This means if the patient got extubated and re-intubated after 1 complete calendar day, this will be counted as an episode. All patients, by default, they will have at least 1 episode, which is the time that they intubated the patient, regardless if the patient was intubated in the ICU or outside ICU. And by the way, the data collection starts from the time he was admitted to the ICU. So again, the components, VAC, IVAC, BVAC, and it's required to be monthly data entry. The graphs that you will see, it's 3 or 4 levels so far. 1 for the unit, 1 for the hospital, and the other one for the system, and the last one, which is the national graph or the national line. So all of the summary data will be entered into 2 areas: the VAE and outcome measures. You can see here the month and the year, ventilator days, which is the total number of yes, the total number of ventilator associated conditions for all of the patients, those who started ventilation in that month, and the number of VAC and VVAP will be also documented here. So again, this is the subject ID, which is documenting a specific number for that patient. We don't ask for the MRN because it's confidential data, but we would like you to have a sheet where you have MRNs with a specific subject ID. So later on, after the validation, if you would like to go back to the chart, you can go back to that particular patient by linking the subject ID to the MRN. If you see here, number one, it's the most important part of it because this is reflecting the month year in the form. So if the patient started to be ventilated, or to be ventilated the first day of the ventilation in January, and the patient spent 2 months in the ICU, we will have only one form for him, and the data will be all reflected to January. It will not be separated into 2 months. So this one here, for all patients who started in January, even if he started at the end of the month, we still document it for January. The second thing, which is the third thing, which is the total number of episodes in mechanical ventilation among patients initiated this month, it will be documented here. And again, it's difficult to have one episode per patient. And if the patient was extubated and spent 1 calendar day from 12 midnight till 12 midnight the other day, he will be considered to have the second episode. The fourth one, which is the total number of vent days among the patients initiated in mechanical ventilation, we count all of the yes. Sometimes we get data collection sheets that's not complete. For example, whenever they have VAC or IVAC or BVAP, they will stop data collection, thinking that we don't need it for the next 14 days. We need to know how many vent days. Yes, we don't look for more VAEs, but we still count it for the outcome measures. The fifth one, which is number 5 here, the total number of ICU days among patients initiated on mechanical ventilation that month. So we count it by getting the date of ICU admission till the day of the ICU discharge. It's not the hospital admission, it's the ICU admission. And the vent days here, it's not the total vent days. He might be ventilated in the ER, then later on admitted to the ICU. So this form will start from the time he was admitted in the ICU, because the episode will be counted for that ICU, not to the previous ICU or previous hospital. The seventh one, which is here, getting the total number of VAC, IVAC, and BVAC. Then we have the episodes. Yeah, sorry, the outcomes, which is if the patient discharged alive from this ICU or died. So at the end, we will get the total number of deaths. So this is labeling the data reflected here in this sheet. For the objective outcome measures, we still have it from, or we get it from the same data collection tool. The components related to the mortality, length of stay, and duration of mechanical ventilation, and it's also monthly data entry. The month year, it's the same thing. The first time the patient commenced ventilation will be reflected for that month. For the total number of ventilated patients this month new to this ICU, we count the number of forms, which is by getting number 2. So the subject ID will be reflecting the total number of ventilated patients, the total number of episodes, mechanical ventilation. So we should have at least a match of the total number of ventilated patients with the number of episodes. It can't be less than that. It should be at least equal. Yes, some patients, they might have one extra episode, which is defined by an extubation, then re-intubation after one full calendar day. Number 4, which is the total number of 10 days this month. Again, I will go back to the sheet. So the total number of ventilator days, which is counting all of the ventilators. And again, this should be only for ventilated patients, even for 1 hour or 2 hours. But we don't get non-ventilated patients, as it will not be counted or measured in this website. The total number of ICU days this month, it's by getting all of the ventilator days, length of ventilator days. The total number of ICU days, it means the length of stay. Sorry. So the total number of length of stay will be counted for all patients, and it will be inserted in that column. And for the total number of deaths in this ICU, we count how many patients died. If the patient spends more than 90 days, then, and he died after, we don't count it. We will consider it as discharged alive from the ICU. Again, this is the data collection sheet. If you have any question, please, you can write it down, or you can raise your hand where you can get the mic. Thank you so much. It seems to be clear, so we don't see any questions, which is good thing. So we can share with you some questions that we did previously. For example, if the lab was collected, let's say a sample was obtained. By obtaining the sample itself and not getting the result of it, this will not be considered in the IVAC. We got a question for, we get a sample and it was sent to the lab. But only for the fact that we got the sample, it's not enough for this. So, any other questions? Okay, so here we have one question. If the patient went into ICU non-vented, then after a few days, he was intubated and ventilated, or let's say with a tracheostomy, then was placed in ventilator. So the days before the ventilator days, we count it as length of stay. Yes, we count it as length of stay. Please feel free if you have any question in the future. So we have groups, and anytime we'll be happy to answer these questions. These presentations will be sent It's already in the website and will be sent to Dr. Bashir. You know where is the location of the CDC calculator? So we ask the other teams to utilize it. It will help them to validate if they have any queries. CDC. So Iman, please be happy.
Please, once you finish entering the data in NASAM website, send us all the forms, scan and send us all the forms. Either if you if you cannot scan, you don't have a scanner, send them as photo to my WhatsApp, Iman, or Abdullah, to the WhatsApp or to the WhatsApp group. Doesn't matter. We will be collecting them. So this is for the validation purposes. Thank you.
So this is okay, Iman. So this is the calculator. It can help you to validate that you captured. The other thing, which is the website. Yeah. The other thing, which is the website. We can go here. Again, we will do it in English. So health professionals in NASAM, and you can see all of the resources and the previous webinars. It's already in the YouTube channel. And that's it. Thank you so much for your time.